a hush falls over. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to CalRecycle's monthly public meeting for June. We're excited and grateful to be doing this here in Diamond Bar. We're thankful to AQMD for hosting us and providing this wonderful venue to host the meeting. We've been here several times for workshops and other events, and it's just really a great space, just top-notch in terms of AV and setting. So thanks very much for having us here and allowing us to conduct the public meeting. So we have a couple of items, or at least one item at the beginning on the director's report that isn't on the agenda, but I wanted to go ahead and present on that.
Actually, you know what? I have one quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thanks for the hospitality. I did want to just briefly announce, you may notice that Teresa Bowie is on the dais with us this morning. Zoe Heller is out on leave, so Teresa is acting policy director for this period of time. So I just wanted to welcome up and thank her for taking on that role.
Yes. Thank you, Teresa. Did you want to say anything? We have time. Okay, very good. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of CalRecycle's pending fiscal year 1920 budget. The budget has been passed by the legislature. Currently, there are a variety of trailer bills that are being considered that affect all aspects of state government, healthcare, transportation. But relative to straightforward expenditures and spending for CalRecycle, the budget is before the governor for final consideration. Several of the items that I'll be highlighting are administration proposals, and so we're confident that they will sustain the governor's decision. So I'm going to move through these if I can. Very good. So just a brief overview. The proposed 1920 budget for CalRecycle is $1.5 billion. The vast majority of that is the beverage container recycling program. And we're projecting about 744.5 authorized positions. I just want to provide a little context. The 18-19 budget, which we're wrapping up, was $4 billion, which seems striking by comparison, but it's important to understand that $2.5 billion of that budget are relative to debris removal operations for the Camp Fire in Butte County and the Woolsey and Hill fires in Ventura and Los Angeles counties. Those are one-time appropriations of general fund that allow the department to conduct debris removal operations in those specific incidents. And we're going to have a presentation a little later this morning on the debris removal program to kind of give an overview rather, of what that is and what CalRecycle does in collaboration with various state and local and federal agencies in delivering that program. And we have projected about 695 positions. These are projections based on what we assume the fiscal year will end in terms of filled positions that we have. So there's always a difference between filled and vacant. So a few of the items to highlight. There's several others, but we're just going to hit a few. One is a waste characterization study for 2020. This is a highly informative study that will help us understand where we are in terms of AB 341 goals, as well as SB 1383 objectives. And this provides a good quantifiable way of looking at what's in the waste stream, what's coming through the waste stream, and how we can best align our programs and develop them in order to respond to our various mandates. And this will be about $985,000 for the budget to conduct these studies. Information security is a critical area for all of state government. There are wide-spanning directives to best address information security, to respond to threats, to respond to malware, and other things. And so we will have 2 permanent positions in our budget, $304,000 annually, to help address a variety of information security policies and protocols to keep our data safe. There was a workshop on this subject yesterday. This is SB 212, the Pharmaceutical Sharps and Waste Stewardship Program. It authorizes 9 permanent positions. It's about $1.4 million annually to help us develop this one-of-a-kind program that those of you who attend the workshop yesterday kind of got a flavor for it. So it's a safe and convenient collection and disposal of home-generated pharmaceuticals and Sharps waste. So as you know, California has been set by a variety of wildfires, many of them causing significant private property damage. CalRecycle is tasked by the Office of Emergency Services to handle the cleanup operations of that. In response to the mounting number of incidents, the frequency and the concurrence of those incidents, the budget includes 24.5 positions and $2.8 million of general fund annually to build a cohesive and coherent team that will spread across program and administrative and legal to help us deliver this program consistently to the state of California. We'll be receiving $25 million from the Cap and Trade Program, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund as it's known. This will help us to fund infrastructure and vessel digestion, compost sites, as well as food rescue and recovery programs, and programs for fiber, plastic, and glass. There's an item in the budget for the beverage container recycling program. It's $5 million to help low-volume sites in terms of a handling fee supplement. Is that an accurate way of characterizing that? And so this will be a monthly supplemental payment to low-volume sites. It's $5 million. My understanding, Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a one-time appropriation. Yes. So there's more information at this website called ebudget.ca.gov. This is a site that is managed through the Department of Finance. The final budget, once it's been signed and all of the decisions have been made from the governor's office in terms of what to sustain, that will be posted there. All of these items will be viewable through that, and that usually happens in mid-July once everything is all reconciled. But there are supporting documents and other information on the various budget change proposals from which these changes came, and so you're welcome to navigate that site. To make it easy on yourselves, you'll want to look for org 3970. That will take you right to the CalRecycle budget. Are there any questions on that item? And if there are, we're asking that all questions, if you come to the front podium, to ask your question, and we will go from there.
And just a quick point of clarification, Ken. It's to all low-volume recyclers, not just those in the convenience zone.
Leonard Lang, I know that's in a budget bill, but has that been passed, or does it need to be passed?
I'm sorry, was your question, has it or does it need to be passed?
The $5 million, yeah.
It was passed by the legislature, so
Okay.
it's awaiting the governor's decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it still needs to be signed.
Yeah, and that was a legislative ad. That was not something that the administration put forward. So that, as with all legislative ads, the governor has sort of the final say on whether or not that sustains.
You know, I'm just a little surprised seeing it without the governor's signature. So.
Yeah, I understand. Mm-hmm.
Ken, there, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, so also on that same item, I'm Susan Collins of the Container Recycling Institute, and even though it wasn't an administration proposal, I just wanted to commend CalRecycle and the administration and the legislature and whoever made that happen. We know that the small volume recycling centers have really been suffering over these last few years, and it's wonderful to have. It's small, but it will help them with the minimum wage increases and the drop in aluminum scrap prices, and so I'm very pleased to see it.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay, I don't see any there. Our hosts have asked us just to make a couple quick announcements here. First is that the restrooms are located in the hallway across the auditorium. In the event of an emergency, if an evacuation is called, please exit the building through the exit doors at the back of the auditorium. If it's a shelter in place, such as in the event of an earthquake, please drop, cover your head, and hold on to your chair. So thank you. All right.
Thank you, Scott. All right, so I'm going to turn to item B on the agenda, and that's public comment. If anyone wants to say a few words on something that is not in the agenda, please go ahead and come forward.
Good morning and welcome to Southern California. My name is Leonard Lang, recyclingandregulation.com, Upper Room Consulting. For the people here, I've been coming to the meeting since December and speaking about issues which I considered important to not only due process, rule of law, protections of the Administrative Procedures Act, and poor legal advice and not getting a PRA. I have gotten the PRAs, and in a most recent PRA, I requested information on the enforcement policies of the department, and I'm starting to receive those. But on the previous PRAs, I got some pertaining my name that were redacted, and I've requested more, and so I would request that those not be redacted. Now, under legal advice, I came across a document this month where, under oath, a senior supervisor within enforcement did not know the definition of canceled, was not familiar with the regulations, and took actions that were in contrary to regulations, and according to his testimony under oath, did so with consultation of the legal office. I think that's worthy of investigation. I'm getting contacted by recyclers across the state on issues of previously baled cans. I would simply say that with my 30 years in the business, I don't find the staff qualified to make these decisions. Now, I have a sample of a can I found walking my dog the other day. I left it in the car, but I will bring that in. And I think if you showed that to your inspectors, they would probably say that's definitely a previously baled can, when it's not, never came close to a baler. And these are the issues that I speak to. Now, last month I also recommended that you do a survey. I did a little one of my own, and I got a couple responses. And I heard from one woman who complained about being put out of business and being threatened by CalRecycle attorneys. I'll be contacting her. She only speaks Spanish, so I'll do a follow-up. Another complained about being denied over $70,000 in payments without getting any reason as to why it had happened, and it still shows as outstanding in Doris. Now, with the PRAs I've sent, my questions would be this. Will I receive these PRAs without redactions, and will you remove the redactions from the previously ones? Most specifically, one that appears to go between the director and the deputy director for communications. I understand that there's a lawsuit pertaining to RDRS. I would appreciate a comment on that. And one of my favorites is the rulemaking for prepayment controls. I have knowledge of at least one recycler who has been denied reimbursement and has received no reason why, and a letter from the attorney has not been responded to in some time. These things happen for months without explanation. So, redactions, will you please not do that? Comment on the lawsuit, and when will we see rulemaking on prepayment controls? I thank you.
Actually, Leonard, can you come back just one sec? Thank you. A lot of things, maybe try and tease through them very quickly here so we can get back into the agenda, but what was your request with respect to a lawsuit?
It's my understanding that there's a lawsuit in regards to the AB 901 regulations.
Yes, that is correct. So what was your question?
Would you comment on it?
Oh, there's not much to comment, so, I mean, I think these are all publicly available documents, aren't they?
Correct.
Yeah, so, I mean, there was ISRI filed a temporary, attempted to get a temporary restraining order against the department for implementing these regulations. That was unsuccessful, so now we're in a briefing period. The next hearing will be on a preliminary injunction. I mean, I don't have any comment beyond that, though.
That's
Thank you.
all there is.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well,
On
so
that
you asked
note-
the question about redactions. To
Yeah.
the extent that things have been redacted from Public Records Act requests, they would be pursuant to the Public Records Act exemptions, I can commit to double-checking what those were, but if they're exempted, they are exempted according to law, and you're not entitled to see those.
I would fail to see what is so privileged, confidential between the deputy director and the director pertaining to me that would be confidential or
Well, my guess is they're not
privileged.
redacted because they pertain to you. It's because of some other reason that they fit within an exemption. But like I said, I will follow up on that and verify what those are for. But to the extent they are exempt under law, you actually aren't entitled to see those. So I will follow up for you.
Elliot, is he entitled to know
The reason.
pursuant to which exemption something has been redacted?
He is, and that should have been communicated.
Okay, well, we can certainly make
It's
that
just,
clear.
no, all I got was a general one.
Okay, well, we
Okay.
can
Well, we can-
clarify
we
that
can
for you.
improve
I'll
on
follow
that.
up on that, sure.
And I,
Appreciate
forgive me, I do have two follow-ups. You mentioned, when you began, you mentioned a case, and I forget the exact details of it, that there seems to be a lack of clarity in what's happening with that case. It was the very first thing that you mentioned. It was where you indicated the enforcement manager was not aware of the rules and the regs around it.
That is correct.
I'm hoping that when you bring those to our attention, if you could follow up with details specifically on which case it was and any dates that you may have, just a concise summary of that, so again, we can kind of explore that
I will,
a little bit more.
I will, because-
And you also mentioned bales, that you're getting calls from several recyclers regarding bales and
It's-
canceled
It's the
material.
determination of previously baled cans in a load.
Great.
And
No, please, go ahead.
when that happens, the department's regulations specify that they can deny reimbursement for the entire load. It's a tremendous punishment. And I think I mentioned in one previous comment that you have the supervisor in LA where I was at a meeting and she brought in a can and said this definitely had to be compressed by a machine with great power. And aluminum is soft. It doesn't take a lot of power. But the can had exploded in the heat. She didn't know the difference between a baled can and an exploded can. And under the definition, you can't make a determination of previously baled based upon one can.
The sense I got from you, though, that you're receiving several calls from recyclers about this. And so-
One in the north, one in the south.
Okay. When that occurs, I think it would be important to encourage them to contact us so that, again, we can kind of do some follow-up and explore what that is. Again, specifics with some dates and locations would be really helpful.
Be advised that the biggest problem I face, and I think because of that you face also, is that these people fear the department and they don't want to do anything that would damage them in the future. Fear is a serious problem. I posted a YouTube video on it a long time ago, but if you're not working with these people and showing them that you're trying to help them, they clam up.
With all due respect, if we don't know who they are, if we don't know the details, if we don't know the dates and the specifics of what's happening, then we can't resolve this problem as it's perceived. So I would encourage you and them to communicate to us so that we can work through this and clear up any misunderstanding or miscommunication that's going on.
This is why I recommended the survey, to give people an opportunity to respond and give you an insight anonymously.
Okay, so
Because they
you
do
made that
feel-
recommendation, Leonard. We appreciate it, and actually, it's taken under advisement as we speak, so thank you very much. Okay, thanks.
Susan, I believe you wanted to comment?
Questions in 3 areas, and I'll be brief on these, but the first of them is regarding the number of redemption centers. I've noticed that the website hasn't been updated in several months. It's for a long time it has said that there are 1,572 redemption centers, and I know that the number changes month to month. So the first question I have 7 questions, and I know that these are things that you won't necessarily have at the tip of your fingers. But the first question is, how many centers remain in operation now? Also regarding redemption centers, is there any public education on the website to teach people how to take containers back to the option A stores that take them back? I was looking for that yesterday and I couldn't find it. And I imagine the average consumer would have a lot more trouble trying to find that information on the website. Also, is the list of Option A stores available on the website? In these places where we now have recycling deserts because so many redemption centers have closed, it's vital that consumers have an opportunity to get their refunds back at these grocery stores. And if they're not on the website, I don't see how consumers would know how to do that. Also, with the closure of the last site in Santa Monica, that site in Santa Monica was covering the area of about 25 grocery stores, as far as I could tell. And several of those, or at least a handful of them, have had exemptions, some of them going back as far as 1997. So I would encourage CalRecycle to maybe take a look at those sites that do have exemptions, because it seems like maybe their exempt status should be reviewed in light of the fact that there's no redemption center for many miles around. Okay, next question is on financial reporting. I'm wondering when the quarterly financial reports will be released. We've now seen 3, almost 4 quarters go by without a quarterly financial report, so I'm curious as to when that will come out. And then on this latest public education contract, the RFP went out last month. I did a little back and forth with your public information officer, Mark Oldfield, and I understand that all of that money is coming from the Beverage Container Fund. I just want to make sure that I understood that correctly. And if so, with a $16 million contract, that must have been several years' worth of beverage container funds. And is it using appropriations from the past years that weren't spent? And is the plan to use beverage container money to educate people about non-beverage container items like other packaging items and mixed paper and organics? And those are all of my questions.
Just real quick on the last one, it's a blend of BCRF, Beverage Container Recycling Fund, and I believe Integrated Waste Management account. So we've blended the funding on that. And my further understanding is that there is an allotment of beverage container money every year through the statute that can be used for that. So it's not necessarily spending prior year money. I want to just thank you for raising the issue about Santa Monica. I know that we received a question from a resident within that region regarding the convenience zone, and I just wanted to just say publicly, if that resident is listening, that we will be responding to her questions about the Santa Monica site. And yes, we understood from that question and from your comments as well, which amplify that was serving a variety of convenience zones, and so we'll need to get some information out to those folks about where their options are, because it was kind of a wide geography there. So thank you for that.
And FYI on that, the City of Santa Monica has up on their website, and they also issued a notice that was available at the site. The only thing that the City of Santa Monica is doing is directing their residents to the next 2 closest sites, one of which is actually my neighborhood site. It's a really small site. I can't imagine the 200,000 people from Santa Monica and Pacific Palisades and Brentwood and Venice and Playa del Rey and Marina del Rey and Mar Vista and Santa Monica. I cannot imagine those 200,000 people coming to my little grocery store parking lot site. So the City of Santa Monica also needs to be educated on redirecting people to places that are closer to them so that they don't have to travel so far, but also so that they don't inundate these other centers and cause a new problem in somebody else's neighborhood. Thanks.
I'd like to comment on the process for the exemption review. We have a normal review process that we're going through anytime a recycling center closes that's in a convenience zone. It typically takes a couple of weeks before we notify all of the dealers that the review is underway, and within a few months we'll have made a determination as to the status of the exemptions that are previously granted.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other public comment questions? Mr. Mahajer, good to see you, sir.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Mike Mahajer, also known as the old dinosaur. I'm a member of the LA County Solid Waste Management Committee, Integrated Waste Management Task Force, big name. Behalf of the task force, I do want to express our appreciation for the board having the meeting over here today and yesterday and tomorrow, and also express appreciation to the staff in Long Beach and Jennifer that is sitting behind me over here, and it's a pleasure to work with them. I know at times I gripe about the stuff, but that's the best I can express my appreciation. There's one item that I would like to when you guys go back into office, is in reference to this composting plan capacity report that was conducted not too long ago. The final document was released on April 29, and I think the name of it was Senate Bill 1383 Infrastructures and Market Analysis Report, dated April 29. This is a letter from the LA County Task Force. I would suggest if you would look at what has been expressed in that letter, and really the goal is to address somehow the inadequacy of the infrastructures and how to address that issue as a team rather than Southern California and Northern California, CalRecycle, local government, and that perspective. With that said, again, thank you very much for being down here.
Thank you, Mike. All right, any other additional comment? Very good. So we're going to now move to some updates. Howard is going to give us a quick overview of yesterday's 212 workshop.
Thanks, Ken, and good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some old friends from Southern California here. And I also want to commend all the staff from Long Beach. You guys have been a great team to work with, and really appreciate all the work you do down here in LA and Orange County. So thanks a lot. And thanks, Mike, for acknowledging them. I wanted to give you a brief summary of where we are on Senate Bill 212, which is the Pharmaceutical and Sharps Waste Stewardship Law. It was passed and signed in late 2018. And it's the first stewardship law in the country that deals with these materials, which, they are, when we have unwanted and improperly managed pharmaceutical drugs and Sharps, they are presenting very significant public health and safety and environmental risks at the end of their useful lives. So this law was designed to address that. It established some safe and convenient disposal options for home-generated pharmaceuticals and Sharps waste. It did this, or it is doing this through an extended producer responsibility approach, and the law charged CalRecycle with implementing that approach in coordination with the Board of Pharmacy. We had 2 early workshops in January and February of this year, just about 2 months after the law was signed, and then we presented draft regulatory text for this program. We first did that a month ago, May 17th in Sacramento, and then we had an identical workshop yesterday here in Diamond Bar to go over that text. The timeline for this program is pretty compressed for developing these regulations. Statute requires CalRecycle to adopt the regulations and for them to be effective no later than January 1st of 2021. And in order for us, it sounds like it's a ways off, it's a year and a half. In order for us to reach that target date, we really have to start the formal rulemaking process in the fall of this year, just about maybe 3 or 4 months from now. So we will be taking the comments that we've heard in the workshops, the various meetings. I know staff is out in the field today visiting various entities related to both pharmaceutical and Sharps management. And we'll be coming probably in October, give or take a month, with a proposed rulemaking text that for the director's consideration so that we could start the the formal rulemaking process. Just very briefly, there's a lot of issues, as you might imagine, in trying to figure out exactly how to manage pharmaceutical and sharps waste and how to structure that within an extended producer responsibility program. So some of the issues that we have been hearing about include the tiered definition of covered entities. That's in the statute. Stakeholders are seeking more guidance on how to identify exactly who's responsible for participating in a stewardship plan and whether or not a particular entity is covered or not. For example, repackagers, they would like to know if a manufacturer is acting as the covered entity and fulfilling the responsibilities for a drug that the repackagers are selling in California. So those are all very nuanced aspects of the whole supply chain for pharmaceuticals, and we're going to be trying to deal with that as best we can in the upcoming draft. Another issue is related to compliance and enforcement. The product lists that we are going to be receiving as part of this, they'll have to be okayed by the Board of Pharmacy, but there are going to be thousands of products on those lists, and we will be publishing that. So people are concerned about the timing of what happens when a new product comes on the market. We've already published a list. How will they be known to be covered in part of the program? So that's something we have to work out. Some folks are concerned on the sharps side of things about the mandatory mailback program, in particular that if there are empty, unused sharp containers, mailback containers that might be disposed of and might end up being in a MRF line, that could cause the processing line to be shut down if somebody sees those containers and thinks they might have sharps waste in them, even though they're empty. So I'm not sure how we'll deal with that, but we have to address that. And there are concerns about the stewardship organizations being able to meet the convenience standards in rural counties where there really aren't that many potential authorized collection locations. So there's a whole range of issues. There were more that were mentioned, but we are working through those, and again, we'll hope to have a full text to the director 3 or 4 months from now. So I don't know if there'd be any comments or questions. I know a few of you were at the workshop yesterday. So I appreciate, we had some good feedback. We had a lot more feedback in Sacramento, but we had good feedback yesterday too. I'll keep moving on.
Did that cover? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next, I'd like to give you an update on another rulemaking package, another significant rulemaking package that we are in the midst of, and this is on Senate Bill 1335, which is the Sustainable Packaging for the State of California Act. As with 212, it was passed and signed last September. This is a law that requires CalRecycle to develop a list of approved single-use food service packaging that is sold by vendors and state agencies, and that is recyclable, reusable, recyclable, or compostable. So it's a relatively small slice of the single-use food service packaging universe because it just applies to vendors and state agencies, but it's very significant because for the first time, the state will be defining what is reusable, recyclable, compostable. So this law is really forcing us to think about some of the consequences of the conveniences that we enjoy. These are items that contribute to litter and marine debris. There's a proliferation of packaging that is not compatible with the state's existing recycling and composting infrastructure. We've been exploring packaging options on those issues, but 1335 gives us additional authority to address these issues. And as I said, how we define these terms is going to be very significant for future broader discussions. We've been partnering with DGS, Department of General Services, Department of Rehabilitation, which is the entity that oversees most of the vendors and state agencies. We've worked with the Department of Toxic Substances Control, the Ocean Protection Council on developing these regulations. The timeline for this is pretty much the same as the timeline for SB 212. We have to have the regs in place and effective by January of 2021. So similarly, we'll be bringing an item to the director, probably the same time frame for starting the formal rulemaking period process on this reg. We had a first workshop on this in April where we looked at the specific language in the bill And then on June 4th, we presented actual draft regulatory text and had a lot of feedback on that. Some of the key issue areas that people commented on during that workshop, there was concern that the vendors and state agencies would be actually responsible for recycling or composting the food service items that they provide, and that's not the case. There was concern that the criteria for what is recyclable single-use food service packaging would limit the amount of materials that can be used in manufacturing those products in order for them to be recyclable and compostable. And it seems to me that's probably the intent of the law, is for us to define that. So we'll be looking at that. There also was concern about one of the provisions in the law that, or one of the criteria that has us look at toxic components. And there were some stakeholders who felt that calling out specific chemicals that can't be used in the production of food service packaging would be premature, and that we'd be jumping ahead of other agencies. But as I noted, we are coordinating with a number of different agencies, and so that's another issue we'll be dealing with. There were other other comments as well, but you can see there's again a wide range of folks looking at this. It has major implications, so I'm sure we'll be getting more comments on that.
Howard, I can't recall, does the statute direct us specifically to engage with other BDOs in particular, or are we just doing that as part of our informal process?
I'd have to go back. It does specify certain certain boards, departments, and offices, and we're outreaching to others as well. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Howard. Any questions for Howard on that particular item? Seeing none, we'll now move to the next presentation. So as I mentioned at the outset, there's additional money and resources in the upcoming budget for CalRecycle to conduct its disaster debris removal program. But I thought it'd be fitting to provide an overview of what that program is. Now, my approach to this presentation, I want to sort of, full disclosure coming into it. This is a rendition of the presentation that I deliver at community meetings. Once an incident has occurred and we have been tasked to respond to the debris removal, there are several community meetings where survivors come forward to hear about this program and to determine if it's something in which they wish to participate. And so this is geared for them, but I want you to note as we go through this presentation, sort of the operational, the logistical challenges that are in it, but also how we try, and I think highly succeed, in delivering some assurance and confidence to fire victims that this is a good program, that this is going to help them take the next steps on the important decisions that they're going to make relative to rebuilding or moving on from their home and from their community after a fire. It's important to understand that many of these victims have lost every tangible memory, every tangible possession that they own in these fires, and all that remains is a pile of ash and debris. And they are grieving, they are in crisis. They're confused and they're lost. And so we try and come forward not just with a confident program, but also with a high degree of empathy and compassion for what they're going through. And there'll be several moments throughout the presentation where I'll sort of highlight where we do that. So if we could turn back to there. So in the foreground, most of the images that you will see are from the Thomas Fire in Ventura. This is what remains of a portion of an apartment complex. Traditionally and typically, we only do private property, but occasionally we will do a commercial property if directed by the Office of Emergency Services because it's posing a particular threat to public health, safety, and the environment. So in the event of a wildfire or a disaster, really of any kind where there is debris, there's a proclamation by the governor and a state of emergency is declared. We are tasked to clean up the sites in an effort to protect public health and safety and the environment, and this also accelerates the recovery process. It provides a means by which local governments can be assured that a vast majority of the properties that have been destroyed will be handled in a clean and effective and efficient way. It also sets the standard by which those who do not want to participate in our program can do so. Most jurisdictions, if not all, will hold private debris removal to the same standard as ours in terms of expectations of soil cleanliness, foundations, and the like. We operate this program with 3 core operating principles. The first is safety. Safety for the crews who are on those sites, safety for the community that is within and around the site, because often the way that these disasters, fires in particular, work is they hopscotch from one parcel to another. Sometimes it's an entire block that's destroyed, but often it'll just be one home and others are left intact, and there are residents still living in those properties. So we have to ensure their safety through effective traffic management, effective dust control. We have air monitoring throughout the communities to make sure that they're not exceeding any sort of standards. There's also a degree of safety that is applied and a principle that ensures that the property to which that homeowner returns is clean and safe. And so we do a variety of background sampling in soils and testing of soils after the parcel is done so that we are assuring them that it is safe for them to return. Our second principle is documentation, making sure that all records are intact, that we are fully aware of the site, the conditions of that site, the size of that site, and what the expectations are for cleaning up that site. And that is documented by our assessment and monitoring contractor. It's also documented by the incident management team that runs the operation. This assures financial integrity, but it also assures that we are meeting the safety objectives of this site once it's completed. Lastly is communication. This is on-the-ground communication between the crews to make sure that there is situational awareness. You have to imagine the Camp Fire in Butte County, for example. It's in the range of 11,000 to 12,000 parcels that we're working on. So that at any given time, there are 144 crews, which about 4 to 6 individuals working on these sites, and anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 trucks on the road moving debris from the sites to the appropriate disposal facilities. It's a lot of moving pieces. That's a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of resources. So the communication principle is that everyone knows where these facilities or where these sites are, who's working on them, who is responsible for managing that effectively, and that that is clearly communicated so that we avoid injury and death. This is just a rough snapshot of the major incidents since 2007. And you can see that from 2007 to 2014, they were sparse and relatively small. But around 2015, all hell broke loose. Starting with Trinity, the Rocky and Jerusalem fires, the Valley Fire in Lake County, the Butte Fire in Calaveras, significant number of sites, significant cost to do that. You'll also notice that the costs vary from site to site. Butte County, the Calaveras County Fire, for example, while fewer sites than Lake County, was more expensive. That kind of speaks to the complexity of what we deal with. Calaveras, the sites were much more remote. They were larger. The debris field on those sites was much more significant. And so it took a lot longer and it took more effort to get out to them. We couldn't take the larger trucks that we were using in Lake and navigate those through the tiny roads of Calaveras in order to be safe. So the 2018 incidents from Klamathman in Siskiyou County to Woolsey and Hill in Los Angeles and Malibu are a significant increase, both in terms of the size, but also in the cost associated with that. Camp Fire, it's 12,000 properties. That's as of now in our lineup. 90% of the town of Paradise completely destroyed. That's the residential and the commercial sector of that community. 30,000 people, I think, remain homeless as a result of that. The sheer devastation is mind-boggling and just heartbreaking to see. The Woolsey Hill Fire, for those in the region, was a little harder to see because it was sort of pocketed, tucked into the hillsides and the mountains, but highly complicated given hillsides, given that some of these sites were near the beach. And so that, again, adds to the operational complexity, making sure that we are managing those sites effectively and not causing additional harm to the environment and the natural habitat around it. So just a brief overview on the process itself. And this is considered characterized as phase 2. And I want to just take a moment to talk about what phase 1 is. So in the initial response, all of these properties, forgive me, most of these properties have household hazardous waste on them. So in response to the immediate public health threat, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, and in the event that this is a federal disaster, US EPA works collaboratively to basically visit every property that has been destroyed in the fire to remove the gross hazards that are there. This is the visible asbestos, propane tanks, paint cans, ammunition, variety of HHW that exists there. They do so because it is an immediate public health threat. They go in, clear those sites, and once phase 1 is complete, then we can begin phase 2 for those who wish to participate in the program. Phase 1 is mandatory because, again, it is a public health emergency. And I just want to take a moment to really acknowledge the Department of Toxic Substances Control in the phase 1 effort. They do an extraordinary job. They are quick, they're prompt, and they are effective. And it's a remarkable thing to see. And without that positive effort, phase 2 wouldn't start in a timely way. So, you know, my deepest respect to DTSC in the work that they do there. If a private property owner wants to be part of the program, they submit what's called a right of entry form. This allows us to go onto their private property to remove the material that's there. We will only do so in the event of a right of entry form. Once the hazardous materials are done, our contractor will do a site assessment, measuring the site, as I said, examining what's there, giving us a sense of what's available. They will also look to see, are there hazardous trees, for example? These are trees that are on site that could pose a danger to the crew doing their work, and those will be marked and dropped. We will do an asbestos survey. It's usually marked by pink paint during the phase 1 process, and we will remove that asbestos. Vehicles will be taken and recycled. Chimneys will be tipped. They rarely survive. They do also include some asbestos. And then we will remove any other metals that are there on site. From there, we then pivot to getting rid of ash and debris. And the debris can be household goods that didn't quite burn up, or just chunks of material, wood, you name it, as well as the ash. We remove all of that, and we get it down to the foundation, and then that is removed. We remove the foundation because from our perspective and our engineering expertise, foundations have been structurally compromised given the heat and intensity of that fire, and they are not safe to build. If the concrete is part of a retaining wall or another aspect that's holding up slopes, we will do our best to stay away from those because removing that can cause additional hazards to the landscape around this particular property. But the foundation itself comes away. Patios may be an exception too, and I think I should caveat everything. There's always a gray area in some of these things, but as a rule, foundations are taken. We remove that concrete. That gives us full access to the soil. It allows us to do a full and thorough examination of any hazardous constituents that still exist within the soil that falls along the foundation footing and sometimes underneath, as well as anything that may have burned that was part of that foundation. Think about PVC, electrical material that's also, dropping down into the soil. The concrete is removed, recycled, and then we do soil conformation sampling. During the site assessment process, we have conducted a background sample of the soil in the area to understand what pre-fire conditions were like. And that becomes the gauge, the marker, by which we are trying to match the soil that is on that particular parcel. And so we have a basis upon which determining what is clean in a pre-fire category. So we'll do some soil sampling, sort of along a grid. Once those confirmation results come back, if everything is clean, we then return that property. We let the county know it's ready. If there are hot spots on the sampler, we will dig a little deeper, retest until we meet that background level, or we determine that there is something more happening at this site. Lake County is a good example of what I mean. Lake County had a long history of gold mining. And so because of that, there was a lot of arsenic, mercury, and other things in the soil in and around the communities that were destroyed in the fire. Also, Lake County had suffered a lot of wildfire in its long history. And for decades, the response was to simply build upon the old burn. So as we were soil sampling, we were finding very high levels of lead, asbestos, mercury, other things, until we finally realized that there was a home here a couple decades ago that burned, and that's what we're running into. We're reaching that old burn. And so we will flag those sites, and then the local government will work with the homeowner, will work with US EPA or DTSC to figure out the next appropriate steps and what to do with that particular property. When it comes back clean, we apply erosion control, puts down sort of a green mulch just to keep the soil from washing away in the event of rain, and then there's a final inspection to make sure that everything has been hit. And then that property is returned to the homeowner, and that homeowner now has the ability to make the next decision on what he or she wishes to do with that site. Many of them rebuild. Some opt to move on and sell the parcel and move to a different part of the state. So these are just some examples of what we see. This is a particularly complicated area in Ventura. You see just the destruction that ran along this block on a hillside. And so there are a host of challenges in dealing with that. You can see also that there's a tall standing chimney that will come down. There's a palm tree, like dead center there, it's still green. And that's the randomness of what happens here. But I also want you to note on the left, several homes that are just intact, untouched by the fire. And that's also what we have to deal with. And so it's a degree of caution in terms of the number of trucks. We have to be very sensitive to the people who are there and the risks to them in terms of dust, noise, vehicle traffic. This is another good example. The one in the back, destroyed in our program, but the one in the foreground was fine. So this is a driveway, and the house used to sit atop that driveway. All of it is down about 20 feet and out another 40 feet just on this hillside below it. This was particularly difficult because we can't work that site from the street. So we had to navigate away along the slope. Fortunately, we were able to find a wide enough path to get a small excavator. In some parts of Ventura, for the most recent fire, we don't have that kind of access. This is not a joke. We have trained our crews on how to rappel, basically how to descend a hillside safely in order that they can get to this debris and remove it. So there's a small excavator right there on the hillside. Makes me a little nervous. That doesn't look entirely safe, but it seemed to work, and we did get that done. And again, you can see in the background, variety of homes that are still intact with people living in them. An air monitor. Star Wars fans will also notice that from Empire Strikes Back. Or no. What was it? Which one? Yeah, the little probe droid that we used in Solo. Here's a typical site under removal. So there's a monitor out front. There are two crew members working the heavy equipment. There's a water tender. And so they're slowly gathering. Looks like they're at the concrete or metals phase at this point. The blue tent is where anyone who has walked onto that site, into the hot zone, they will need to remove all of their Tyvek, their personal protective equipment in that. No one walks off that site having walked on it without going through that process of removing all that material so that they're not taking ash and other hazardous constituents with them into the community. So that is strictly monitored and managed. At the end, this is what it looks like. Just a clear parcel. You'll notice some of the retaining walls, some other items are still there. There's still a stem that's there because it's not necessarily part of the structure. There's some burned timber right there in front, again, not posing a threat. The homeowner can do with that what they see fit. This is an example from Lake. Again, close-up look of one side of the street gone, the other relatively intact. And this is what it looked like afterwards. You can see some erosion control there, some wattles, some work still happening in the background. This, I believe, is also in Lake County, but a more recent incident, Mendocino. There's the application of erosion control as we go through. cleared parcel. There's a marker, indicates what's been done. We now keep those electronically so that anyone can track kind of what's happening. There's a dashboard that's maintained so any resident can see kind of where they are in the process and the status of the cleanup. Some hillside, I like this one because it's some hillside erosion control that was applied so things aren't washing down. But also in the left corner, you can kind of see there's some new construction that's starting to happen. This is a bougainvillea that was growing in the middle of a burned out site in Ventura. So this is what we share with the community. This is how we let them know what they're going to see and experience to answer their questions. We spend a great deal of time talking about the right of entry form. We encourage homeowners to let us know if there are personal items, effects that they would like us to look for in the debris. The crews actually look on that with a lot of enthusiasm. It becomes something of a treasure hunt for them, the effort to try and regain some memento from the fire. A typical ask is of veterans who are looking for their medals. I met a veteran who lost his home in the campfire in Paradise, and the only thing he wanted to find was his Purple Heart. He was a Korean War veteran and suffered a horrible wound in Korea, and he was able to find his Purple Heart. And so it took on, from my perspective, a little added value as yet another thing that he survived. We really stress to everyone involved in this, both within CalRecycle, but also our crews, the workers who come from, many of them all over the state. A lot of them are local. We try and encourage our prime contractors to hire locals. But the whole idea here, as we talked about the recovery process, it's not just rebuilding, but it's also helping this community heal. And I was at an all-hands meeting. This is a once-weekly meeting where all of the crews come together in Butte County. And it's in advance of the day's work. It's every Wednesday, just to remind them about certain safety protocols, to update them on what's happening, to sort of flag and give some accommodations to extraordinary work. And it's fitting to me that all-hands meeting happens in a church, a place where community gathers. And the overarching theme from the beginning of the community to the all-hands meeting to the end of the all-hands meeting is community. Remembering why this work is being done is to help people rebuild their lives. And the crews themselves, I've even asked the crews at an all-hands meeting, so why are we here? Every time, we are rebuilding community. And it was most moving that a fire victim, a woman who lost her home, but had just had her property cleaned by one of our crews, made a point of coming to just say publicly how grateful she was for the work that was done. And so, as I said at the outset, there's a degree of empathy that goes on with this that is unique to what a government program delivers. And so we're extraordinarily proud of the work that we do, but I would say, again, from my perspective, I am most proud of the staff at CalRecycle who work on this outside of their regular jobs, because as you saw, there's a budget item to bring some resources who will be specifically dedicated to this. But all of those incidents that you saw from 2007 until now have been resources that we've redirected from other parts of the department to do this. And they do it with enthusiasm and compassion because it's just that important to them and to us. So that concludes my presentation. I know I exceeded 20 minutes. My apologies. Any questions?
Ken, while we're waiting for questions,
Mr.
potentially, just to add in, I think just take a moment that the chief deputy was able to make this presentation in the level of detail because he lives and breathes this, as many of us do at CalRecycle. And I know that Scott could probably do a very similar presentation. So that's, I think, indicative of how we've needed to approach these is all hands on board, all working together. And as we have been tasked with these larger projects, we also had to work with Cal OES and others to reach out to other state staff. And many of the Cal EPA BDOs have stepped up and provided resources too. But CalRecycle continues to find volunteers to go out, and the commitment has increased as it progresses too. So there's significant sacrifice going on at multiple levels. But I want to just share my appreciation both for Scott and Ken for supporting this and finding us the resources, and looking forward to a different and more robust approach, and then also getting folks back to their real jobs, so that we can continue on the greater mission of CalRecycle. So thanks.
Thank you, Mark DeBee. You've demonstrated extraordinary leadership on this as well, so my compliments to you. Great. Well, seeing no questions, we'll now move on to our next item. I don't know if Hank is here. He's cramming for midterms. So we do have, as most of you know, a workshop this afternoon, starting at 12:30, to go over comments and the revised regulatory text in advance of the 15-day comment period, as it indicates here. So that will be here in this room, starting at 12:30. We anticipate some really thoughtful presentations. We look forward to, for those who will be here, your active engagement in that. I know that there'll probably be more individuals who come in the afternoon. So, not to understate it, 1383, kind of a big deal. So we appreciate your interest and your participation in that process. Howard, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add relative to that. Okay, I can't hear nodding, sorry. Very good. I believe, is Kate going to provide the update on this? So on RDRS, Kate, if you wouldn't mind coming up, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate Wilkins. I'm an environmental scientist in the Policy Development and Analysis Office. I'm here to give you an update on our recycling and disposal reporting system and invite everyone to join us at our second reporting requirements workshop, which will be in this building tomorrow from 9 to 12:30. I also believe there's a presentation on, that'll show up. For some brief background, we're not missing anything yet on slides. Yes, this one. Thank you. So for some brief background, AB 901 was passed in 2015, changing how organics, recyclable material, and solid waste are reported to CalRecycle. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, I see. So then AB 1103 was passed, requiring CalRecycle's regulation. Thank you. Perfect. Requiring CalRecycle's regulations to also include food waste haulers. So the intent of AB 901 was to, 1, require disposal and recycling and composting facilities and operations to report directly to CalRecycle, and 2, give CalRecycle enforcement authority. Current reporting in DRS, which is being phased out after Q2 of this year, that reporting was often significantly late, inaccurate, and incomplete. And 3rd, update reporting to provide CalRecycle with similar tools to our waste hire program so that the department can enforce compliance in the submission of this data. So how does this regulation change reporting, and how will this help? Well, currently only permitted solid waste facilities and haulers who export out of state report the total tons sent to disposal by jurisdiction of origin, as well as some other data points, to counties and regional agencies. So AB 901 widens the reporting requirements to require reporting on the flow of recyclable and compostable materials by material type, by recyclers and composters, as well as exporters, transporters, brokers, and food waste self-haulers. So it will also, I shouldn't have gone fast. It also provides for enforcement by the department for late reporting and misreporting of data. And so these expanded reporting requirements will enable the state to perform much more detailed analyses of both waste and recycling flows, which will enable us to do better evidence-based policymaking. So this new reporting system will be a vast improvement over the current system. Direct reporting will streamline the process and allow for data to be made available to jurisdictions and the public much more quickly than it has previously. The data system architecture will allow, for example, disposal facilities to view what transfer processors reported sending them, and then they can accept or modify the incoming tonnage. This will lead to better and more granular reporting about the origins of waste, even when it flows through multiple facilities prior to being disposed. And with the department serving as the central repository of data, this will facilitate better information collection and processing. More detailed information will aid jurisdictions so that they can correct or follow up on any potential issues soon after they arise. And we'll also have new reports for reporting entities available about the types and quantities of material handled from quarter to quarter and year to year, so they can verify that their data is accurate and they can gain insight into where their material is going as it's reported into our system. So where are we in rolling out RDRS? The registration period for facilities and businesses required to report under the regulations ended on April 30th, though CalRecycle will not take enforcement actions for entities that registered prior to May 31st. Of course, the registration module remains open, as new facilities will need to register when they reach their de minimis tonnage thresholds or when new facilities come online, so this registration module will never close. DRS reporting, our current system, ends after Q2 of this year. So starting in Q3, which begins July 1st, reporting entities need to begin recording information. And the due dates for reporting that information is shown on the slide. It's rolling due dates because, as I mentioned previously, the information entered by contract haulers and food waste self-haulers will be available to transfer processors, recycler composters, brokers, or transporters that they are sending tonnage to, who can then confirm and accept that data or modify the tonnage. So then the data entered by those entities, who must report by November 30th, is available to disposal facilities. So in terms of the training CalRecycle has offered so far, we completed our registration workshops in March, one in Sacramento and one here in Diamond Bar. That covered who is required to register and how to register your business or facility in RDRS. So on April 17th, we recorded a webinar to go over this material. That video is available online along with the individual sections, kind of separated out, that are pertinent to specific entities. So that will be helpful. You don't have to scroll through the webinar to find the part that's relevant to you. On May 21st, we held the first reporting requirements workshop in Sacramento. This covered what information different reporting entities need to report in RDRS. This did not cover how to enter the information into RDRS, just what info entities need to begin recording on July 1st. The slides are up from this workshop, as are the videos, and an Excel spreadsheet that lists the reporting requirements for different entities. Tomorrow, June 19th, we will be offering this workshop again in this building, and it will be webcast over GoToMeeting. I'll have some details on the next slide. And then again on July 8th, we will offer the workshop again in Sacramento from 9 to 12 a.m. That will also be webcast. So tomorrow, this workshop is being held 9 to 12:30. My colleague Steven Sander, who has led all of these workshops so far, will be leading this one. It will be webcast, as I said, over GoToMeeting. The link is on this slide. And you can find this slide on the CalRecycle June monthly meeting event page if you need to access this link. It'll also be on the RDRS webpage on the CalRecycle website. And you will be able to submit online questions if you're watching remotely. Our meeting will, again, be recorded and available on the RDRS webpage following the meeting. I also just want to briefly flash the details for the July workshop. This information is also posted online. And with that, we hope to see a lot of you tomorrow, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kate.
Sure.
Any questions on that item?
No, but I
Yes,
have,
Mr. Lang.
after the questions, I'll have something to add.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the reporting, when I responded to the 901 rulemaking, I treated recyclables as not being governed by this. But had I changed my position on that, I would have said you could have collected all the certified recycler information right off of Doris and not require them to do anything. Is there any thought being put to doing that in the future? Minimize their burden? It's all in Doris.
Steve will answer that. Or take a stab at it anyway.
Hi, Mr. Lang. Steve Sander, environmental scientist, knowledge integration section. With respect to your question about the certified sites, we had sent out a pre-registration, sort of a reminder letter to those entities, reminding them of their responsibility to, if applicable, register and report. I would say that for the vast majority, possibly 95 to 99% of those recycling centers probably wouldn't meet or exceed the de minimis tonnage threshold of 100 tons a quarter for the materials that they handle on a quarterly basis. Therefore, there would be no need for most of those facilities to even interact or interface whatsoever with the system. It's really only we're targeting more so the processors, the folks who accept that material from the, for instance, convenience zone recyclers. Yeah, in many instances, we've fielded questions from those entities. We've gone through a process of, there's also a tool online that will help folks understand sort of their, what their level of interaction would need to be within the system. We found that, in the vast majority, like I said, 90 to 99% of the cases, those very small convenience zone recyclers and the like, they do not have a reporting obligation. So therefore, there was no, thought given to, essentially pre-registering them. And moreover, and not to sort of belabor this, but entities are required to submit these data points under penalty of perjury. That's pursuant to the statute. So it wouldn't be the case that we would have that ability to go in and do that work for them, if that makes sense.
Reporting under Doris is also done under penalty of perjury.
Okay, and yeah, those entities had to register on their own and submit those data.
Very good. Stephen, thank you for that response. Mark DeBee, I believe you had a comment?
Yes, just to add on, certainly the effort right now is to register folks and get them to a place where they can report. But I just wanted to highlight too that with disposal reporting, solid waste facilities, permitted solid waste facilities a number of them had been required to keep records on site that could be examined by LEAs during their regular inspections. So with the reporting or recycling and disposal, there's still a record-keeping requirement. It's expanded to additional types of sites that hadn't previously been involved with that. My group is developing some guidance for local enforcement agencies on educating them on, there's these additional requirements, and then providing some guidance on how to approach them. We have a level of complexity in that we have a standardized template for inspection forms. That doesn't recognize the expanded requirements, and so we're coming up with a strategy to address that until we can provide new forms to the LEAs. But the direction's going to be, look at the records. If you're not keeping records, it's going to be very hard to report. So I think it's key that folks not only register and be prepared to report, but also make sure they're keeping records and keep them in a manner that can be reviewed by local enforcement agencies. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions or comments on this particular item? And seeing none, I believe I'm going to turn it to Howard for a few items. Two.
Thank you, Ken. I have a couple of items under the grant and loan programs. These both concern smaller cleanup programs. So historically, we've done cleanup programs on a much smaller scale than what you're seeing in the debris recovery. But these have been important programs historically. One of them is the Farm and Ranch program, and I have a brief item to present on the eligibility criteria and evaluation process for the Farm and Ranch program for the next two fiscal years 1920 and 2021. The purpose of this program is to clean up and abate the effects of illegal disposal on farm and ranch property that's owned by innocent parties. And the eligible applicants can either be a local agency such as a city or a county, a resource conservation district, or a Native American tribe. We've run this for many, many years. We have been typically a little bit undersubscribed, so we've tried some different things in the past few years. We're proposing to use the same eligibility criteria and evaluation process as the last 2 fiscal years, which includes offering a pilot program in the 3rd cycle of each fiscal year. And the pilot program is one that allows applicants to apply with less than usual documentation and gives them some additional time to secure the required documentation, such as detailed budget and zoning designations and things like that. This has proven to be useful for situations where we're dealing with dump sites, for example, created by illegal marijuana growing operations, where the applicant or the site is considered an active crime site, and the applicant cannot access the site until they go in with the sheriff's office. So under the pilot program, an applicant can get an award approved, and then he'll have sufficient time to get all the appropriate documentation in place, and then go in and access and clean up the site on a time schedule that's in accord with law enforcement timeframes. So that pilot program has been successful. We've had a number of different good applications under that. The amount available for this program is $1.8 million per year for the next 2 years. This item is delegated to me. I'll see if there's any questions, but I intend to go ahead and approve it. The eligibility and criteria process. I want to thank Stephanie Becker and Jeff Lynn for their work on this. Before I end on this one, I also want to mention, and this is listed later in the agenda item, but we are going to go ahead and this is the only grant program where we have some regulations that are associated with it per statute. So we're going to go ahead and do some minor revisions to the regulations, in part to incorporate the pilot program into it. And that we'll have an informal rulemaking workshop on those regulations on Thursday, July 18th at CalEPA. So I don't know that there's many folks here in Southern California who have farm and ranch property who are in the audience, but there probably are some resource conservation districts in outlying areas who can avail themselves of this program. So I'll go ahead and approve that. And then I have just an information item to announce awards for another cleanup program, again, a small cleanup program. This is for the local government waste tire amnesty grant program. This provides funding for cleaning up and removing waste tire stockpiles where local governments can hold collection events for the public to bring in their tires, as long as it's below a certain number of tires at no charge. Eligible applicants include cities, counties, special districts, and again, qualifying Native American tribes. So the eligibility criteria and the process for this was approved in January. We had applications that were due in March, and we received 38 applications requesting $1.66 million in grant funds. All of these applications were in accordance with the prescribed criteria, so we went ahead and approved that. So this item is just announcing that, and there's a list of those awardees in the agenda item, and I want to thank Kathy Agregard and Jeff Lynn for those. Ken, that's all I have until we get to e-waste.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Howard on those items? Seeing none, Mark DeBee. Looks like a couple updates on.
Thank you. So I'm going to present on the tire and solid waste facility permits in process. Paulina Lawrence usually does this, but she's attending an LEA roundtable. So I have the pleasure of doing this. So just an update on the L&D landfill permit. This was discussed at last month's meeting, but the date for which CalRecycle is required to act has been adjusted from June 14th to June 28th. And action has not yet been taken on that permit. Also last month, Paulino read into the record the permit action relative to zero waste energy development in the city of San Jose, and that still is in process, no action on that permit as yet. After the monthly meeting agenda was posted, we received an application package for the Mission Trail Transfer Station in Santa Clara County. It is for a revised solid waste facilities permit. Action is required by August 10th of this year. A review of the permit package as received indicates that it is mainly to reflect an increase in permitted hours of operation, in that additional days of operation are going to be added in. The site intends to be open during Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Labor Day. And then there are some minor adjustments to the report of facility information. So are there any questions regarding the permit actions? All right. Shall I continue on? All right. So this is our twice-a-year update on activities relative to hearings for compliance and enforcement and administrative appeals for that the department's taking in the area of jurisdiction compliance, mostly relative to mandatory commercial recycling. So since the last update in March, there's been two public hearings. One of them for which was with the city of San Bernardino. In February of this year, a hearing was held to consider the issuance of a compliance order to the city for failing to implement the MCR program. Based on what was presented by the city and at the public hearing, I made the decision to continue the hearing until May. During the continuance period, the city was able to submit supporting documentation regarding their efforts to fully implement the MCR program. Based on a complete analysis of the city's efforts by the staff felt confident that the city was on the right path and withdrew, withdrew their recommendation for noncompliance and found the city met the good faith effort, and I agreed with that determination. The other hearing was for the city of Ripon. On May 21st, we had a public hearing to consider whether the city fully implemented all of the conditions of their compliance order. Based on the staff report and other supporting documentation from the city, I determined that, indeed, all of the terms of the compliance order was met. In approving the completion of the city's compliance order has resulted in the transfer of the city back to the Local Assistance and Market Development Branch, and LAMB will be incorporating the city into the next 2-year review cycle. So, success for Ripon. The remaining jurisdictions that are on active compliance orders, there are 7 of them, and they are in various stages of review by staff. But just to remind folks of the ones that are in process is the unincorporated areas of Merced County, the City of Commerce, City of Compton, City of Tracy, City of Waterford, City of Oxnard, and the City of El Segundo. And I have details on those, but basically they are in the oversight period, and staff continues to monitor their progress, and there is nothing unusual to report at this time relative to that process.
Thank you, Mark.
Any questions regarding JCU enforcement?
Well, I guess my only question is, knowing that you and I grew up in neighboring communities, I've always known it to be pronounced Ripon, not Ripon. And this dispute has torn families asunder. This runs about as deep as almond versus almond. But
well,
Ripon?
Since you're from Manteca and I'm from Escalon. I think we can be liberal in terms of how we pronounce it. I do have cousins living there, and that's how they prefer to refer to it. So.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, this runs deep. We'll gather some Riponians
and the fact
together.
that I have cousins there did not factor into my decision on their ability to compliance.
Nice save.
Okay.
Very good. So Howard, why don't you tell us about e-waste fees?
Okay, thank you, Ken. It's hard to follow up that exchange. This is an action item for the director's consideration. This is about the approval of the covered electronic waste recycling fee. The financing for the covered electronic waste program comes from a recycling fee that consumers pay at retail stores when they purchase a new covered electronic device, a video display device like a plasma screen TV or something of that sort. The fee is used to make sure that there's sufficient funds in our what we call the electronic waste recovery and recycling account to both administer the program and in particular to provide payments to collectors and recyclers for the end-of-life management of these covered devices. And per statute, CalRecycle is responsible for evaluating the solvency of that fund every year to ensure that there's sufficient revenues to fund the program. We have authority to adjust that fee that the consumers pay, the recycling fee. We have to do that by statute by August 1st, and if we do make a change, then that change would be effective the next January 1st. So to assess this, and actually I'm presenting this on behalf of Sarah Keck in the Budget's office, to assess this, our program staff work very closely with the Budget Office to analyze a number of different factors. This recovery rates and recycling trends of covered electronic waste to see what the future payouts might be. We look at covered electronic device sales trends to project revenue, potential revenue coming into the fund. We look at what the program-related operational costs are, and we look at the available fund balance, and then we make an assessment of what fee structure is needed to make sure that we still have an adequate and stable revenue level in the fund. So in this year's analysis, if those of you who have looked at the item, you'll see a chart in attachment 2 that shows the trend. I don't have it up here on the screen, but it shows a very significant trend over the last 4 or 5 years of a decline in the legacy materials, the old cathode ray tubes, the TVs, and the computer monitors that had the big cathode ray tubes. We have had a significant decline in the volume of those materials coming into the program, and then a significant increase in the number of non-cathode ray tube covered electronic devices. But the overall trend is down. The volume of material that's coming through the program is coming down. So as a result of that, the revenue that we get from the recycling fee that's charged at the retail level, that revenue has been accumulating in the fund balance, and the fund balance has been growing. And that's going to continue to increase unless we take action to adjust the fee. So our Budget's office did a number of projections. Those are described in attachment 3 in the item, and those show that if we adjust the fee levels from it's currently $5, $6, and $7, and that depends on the screen size, if we adjust that down by $1 to $4, $5, and $6, that will responsibly reduce that increased balance to an adequate level over the course of the next fiscal years, but it will still allow us some flexibility in case we need to make some changes in the next year, and I'll talk about that. Well, actually, I'll talk about that right now, because next year, every other year, we're allowed to change the payment rate that goes to recyclers and collectors, and next year we anticipate that because of the changes in commodity markets and some of the changes in the operational aspects of dismantling covered electronic devices, that we'll probably have to increase both the payment rate for cathode ray tubes and also the separate payment rate for the non-cathode ray tubes. Those latter kinds of things, flat screen panels and so on, have less intrinsic commodity value in them, and those commodity values have gone down over the last year, and they also take longer to dismantle, so it's a higher operational cost. So we probably are going to have to increase the payment rate, but we're confident that even with this reduction in the recycling fee that consumers pay, we still will have adequate funds in the adequate dollars in the fund to accommodate any payment rate increase next year. And then in future years, while we don't want to change the fee very often, if we do need to in order to keep the fund solvent, we have that ability to do so every year. So we are recommending to the director that we change the covered electronic waste recycling fee from the current $5, $6, $7 levels to $4, $5, and $6. And we further recommend that Title 14, Section 18660.40 be revised to reflect this change in the fee levels. And assuming that the director approves this recommendation, we'll work with the legal office to promulgate emergency regs to reflect the new levels. Before I turn it over to Scott, if he has any comments, I want to just mention a couple things. One is certainly to thank Nicole Clay from the Budget Office, Anna Maria Stoyan-Chu, who is the branch chief for the e-waste program, and Irina Kamenier from the legal office for their work on this item. And then I want to just say that there's a lot of other things going on in the e-waste world. Last May of 2018, we issued a policy paper on what we think CalRecycle thinks the future of electronic waste management should look like in California, and so there are many policy considerations in that paper. I also want to mention the MOU that we have with the Public Utilities Commission between, signed by Director Smithline and President Picker of PUC, where we're working on a white paper by the end of this year that will lay out what the state thinks ought to be done with solar panels and electric car vehicle batteries. I want to thank Teresa for her leadership on that. There was a working group meeting last week, I think it was. So that's moving along. And then associated with that, but independent, is AB 2832, which is calls on Cal EPA to put together an advisory committee on lithium-ion batteries from vehicles, with a report due to the legislature in about 3 years. So we're working very closely with Cal EPA and the Department of Toxic Substances Control on that. Again, that's under Teresa's leadership. So I just wanted folks to know that those things are going on. And Teresa, I don't know if you want to say any more, but you've done a great job of honchoing those.
No, I think you covered it. Thanks, Howard.
Okay. So with that, I'll turn it, just our recommendation, Scott, is to you is to change that recycling fee.
So thank you very much, Howard. Excuse me. Based on the analyses from you in the budget shop, I'm very confident in this, so I intend to approve this, of course. I just was going to say basically what you just said, and I just don't want the reduction in this fee to be interpreted as somehow we've got mission accomplished on e-waste, right? That's not at all. This is really just very specific for the SB 20 covered electronic devices. There's a huge amount of work to do, so if this is an area of interest to you, please do review the paper that we've put out, the white paper, and check in with Teresa on the work we're doing on solar panels and EV batteries, because that's really just a tidal wave of additional electronic waste and material that we're going to have to be dealing with in the next decade or two. So thanks for that.
Excellent. Any questions for Howard on that particular item? Seeing none. Howard, forgive me, did you mention the workshop in your earlier presentation? I apologize.
I did. In the Farm and Ranch item, I did
Yeah,
mention
the
that
last item here.
Yeah, we have a workshop
Yes.
on Farm and Ranch coming up July 18th.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I took it out of order.
Great. So I believe that brings us to the end of our meeting. So again, our sincere thanks to AQMD here in Diamond Bar for hosting us. Really it's a fantastic venue, top-notch facility with great AV. I will say Adam Tauber looks remarkable on the big screen. Looks like a beverage container guru, you know. No, you look good, man. You really, yeah. Hair and makeup works for you. So thank you all for being here. Please, the 1383 workshop begins at 12:30. Promises to be really, really interesting, thoughtful presentations. And thank you for your time this morning. We'll be taking this back up to Sacramento for the July public meeting. Have a good day.